Hello, brothers and sisters. This is your boy BC. Welcome back to the Based LDS video. And this is a video I've been looking forward to for some time. I wanted to make sure I had this one correct and that I knew what I was talking about with this one. And I'm amazed by how much I still want to know. Today I'd like to talk to you about the dedicatory prayer of the land of Jerusalem for the gathering of Israel. And this Elder Orson Hyde was commissioned to do this, and he completed this task on October 24th, 1841. So 182 years ago today. This is something I planned on talking about probably 4 or 5 months ago, and I put some research into it, did some reading. When I found out about the day, I made sure I wanted to release this today. It's all the more poignant to talk about this today in light of what's going on in Israel at the moment, with the tensions between them and some of their surrounding neighbors, especially as dealing with Hezbollah and Hamas, and some of their current strains and how people view them. And I do think there's a reason these things are going on. But let's talk for a minute, shall we, about the actual dedication. This is an artist's rendering of Orson Hyde on the Mount of Olives as he's offered up his prayer. And he's looking out over Jerusalem. You can see there Jerusalem's walls, the dome that's been put up. And this was a hard journey for Elder Hyde. And we'll talk about the entire experience, but let's talk about a bit first about who Elder Hyde is, shall we? Elder Orson Hyde was born on January 8th, 1805. And so, same year as the prophet, same age. At 14, he walked from Derby, Connecticut to Kirtland, Ohio, where he was later employed as a retailer. I'm trying to imagine that taking place today. In 1827, he joined the Methodist Church in Kirtland. That church, later he would affiliate with the Reformed Baptist Society, and that church would later be known, after a couple other name changes, would eventually get down to the Campbellites. And he was actually set apart as a minister for the Campbellites for Mentor, Ohio in 1830. When the saints came to Ohio, he argued against the Book of Mormon. However, some of you may be aware by the name Campbellites, a fellow minister and someone that he was associated with, Sidney Rigdon, joined the church. When that happened, Orson took to studying the Book of Mormon a bit more seriously. And he was baptized on October 1831. Here are some of the things that he saw and did while he was shortly after joining the church. He was present for the organization of the School of the Prophets in 1833. He marched from Zion's camp in 1834. In 1835, he was ordained as one of the first sets of apostles. And at the time, I believe he was the 5th in seniority when he was set apart. He served a series of missions throughout the U.S. and then traveled with Elder Heber Kimball to Great Britain in 1837 on a mission, returning in 1838. When he got back, he felt disaffected from the church and that God was no longer with Joseph. There were a lot of things going on in Kirtland at this time, a lot of unrest. In 1838, he stood with Thomas B. Marsh and signed an affidavit that culminated in an escalation of action against the church with the people of Missouri. Because of this, he was disfellowshipped in 1838. And then a couple months later, in May 1839, he's removed as an apostle. However, he returned to the church. He recanted his statement. he apologized with a great deal of sincerity. Some heartfelt sorrow, I'm sure, was felt, but also some gladness, and he was restored to the apostleship in June 1839. So he was never excommunicated, but he was disfellowshipped. And then after that, then he was removed as an apostle. So there took a time, there was a process there. In 1832, after his baptism, the prophet Joseph laid his hands on Elder Hyde's head and prophesied, "Thou shalt go to Jerusalem, and by thy hand shall the Most High do a good work, which shall prepare the way and greatly facilitate the gathering together of that people." Another revelation, section 68, verse 1, that names Elder Hyde specifically, would hint to the work Elder Hyde would do. And this revelation was received in 1831 after his baptism. In March of 1840, so this is 9 years after the revelation, 8 years after the prophet laid his hands on his head, Orson received a revelation. He saw that he must visit certain cities and pronounce a blessing upon the land of Jerusalem. He said he was awake for about 6 hours, wrapped up in this vision, seeing all sorts of things. He does go into a little bit more detail, but obviously not 6 hours worth of detail. He reports this vision to the saints during conference in April of 1840, like a week later. As soon as he's done, the prophet Joseph Smith stands and sets a motion and declares that Elder Hyde will proceed on that mission and that the church will provide him letters certifying his mission from the First Presidency and the clerk of the conference. So once this was done, Joseph moved swiftly to get Orson Hyde out. Now, shortly after Joseph set that motion in order, another gentleman, Elder Johnny Page, stood and testified to the importance of Elder Hyde's call. And because of that, Elder Page was assigned to go with Elder Hyde on this mission. They would leave about a week later, and the details of the calling for Elder Hyde and Elders Hyde and Page were recorded in the Times and Seasons that immediately followed the conference. And it was some of the things that they marked upon is that the scattering of the Jews among the Gentiles had gone on long enough, and the time for a return to their land should commence. And Joseph called upon members of all Christian denominations and all gentlemen and ladies to render whatever aid required to fulfill this mission, so as to bless the people whose blood had been shed so frequently. And then it was April 15th when Elders Hyde and Page departed. So they did not wait long to get out the door and go. This was a big thing. And let me say this, it is clear from the revelations that Joseph well understood that the gathering of Israel was both spiritual and physical, and that the Jews were to be gathered to a place. I know sometimes we talk about, is it spiritual? This is both. Gathering of Israel is spiritual. Look at the missionary work we have going on. People coming to the church from all over. But also the Jews, the original covenant people, are being gathered back to their covenant land so that they can be restored to their right. Now, on their travels, Elder Hyde, who had been in England just 2 years before, remember, on a mission with Elder Kimball, he understood that the saints in England were poor. Economic circumstances were low. And he knew that the best chance for procuring funds for the mission was to take place in America. And he and Elder Page spent several months slowly traveling, preaching as they went, occasionally separating to double their efforts, and then rejoining again later. preaching, trying to raise funds for them to go. And there's one particular time, Elder Hyde was preaching in Philadelphia, and he had reached the end of a sermon and then expressed his desire and the need for funds to continue on to the Holy Land. And there was a gentleman in the office who heard this, or not the office, but in the meeting, who heard this and sent his son to retrieve a bag of gold. And this benefactor provided a bag of gold on the condition that Elder Hyde should pray for him in Jerusalem. Elder Hyde agreed to do this and did indeed fulfill that promise. And we'll see that later. So, as I mentioned, Elder Hyde and Page would often separate. And they had been out now for about 10 months, still preaching, still raising funds. And Elder Hyde at this point in time was in New York. And he was awaiting to be met up again with Elder Page. And he somehow Orson got a copy of the Times and Seasons that had just come out. And Joseph had published in the Times and Seasons that Elders Hyde and Page were taking too long, and the Lord was not well pleased with the progress of their mission. So Elder Hyde gave some thought on the mission, on what should be done as he was waiting for Elder Page, and he decided upon proceeding alone. And he left for London on February 1841 on a ship to the United States. And as it turned out, Elder Page was actually on the process of returning home. So Elder Hyde would finish the mission by himself. And I want you to think back to these days. These are not the fast, mechanically powered ships that we have now. This would have been a long, arduous overseas journey. Plus, he's traveling town to town, relying upon the kindness of strangers to take him in, to give him money to live, but also money to save for the trip. So now moving on by himself was going to just double the intensity of the situation. So once he left, he would continue to move and to proselyte along the way, and it would still take him several weeks and much proselyting to raise the funds needed for and to establish connections, so that when he got to the Holy Land, he would be taken care of. He arrived in Jaffa on October 20th, 1841, and he got a letter of recommendation from the consul, the American consulate, which would allow him entry into the land as a missionary to do work. He also, as he put it, met several English gentlemen, and he traveled with them and their several armed guards for security. This was not a safe place. At this time, Israel was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. And there were certain tensions between the Turks and the Jews and Christians entering the land on pilgrimages and things. And so this was an arduous journey. Plus the time, the distance, and the season. It was hot there, and this took a toll on Elder Hyde. He did arrive in Jerusalem on the 22nd. He took a couple days to recover. He met with the English benefactors on the 23rd to have a meeting and let them know what he was going to do. But on the morning of the 24th, he awoke before dawn, set out for Mount of Olives, where he would record and offer his prayer of dedication. And when he got to, we're going to go back to that first slide there. When he got to the Mount of Olives, you see down here on the left-hand corner, there's a small altar of stones. He erected a small altar, wrote out a quick letter with some of his thoughts that he would send to Parley P. Pratt, and then he offered his prayer, and he recorded his prayer. So we do have a copy of that prayer. I want to read that now and then talk about how how that's coming to pass today. So here's the letter. O thou who art from everlasting to everlasting, eternally and unchangeably the same, even the God who rules in the heavens above and controls the destinies of men on the earth, wilt thou not condescend through thine infinite goodness and royal favor to listen to the prayer of thy servant, which he has this day offers up unto thee in the name of thy holy child Jesus, upon this land where the Son of the righteous shed in blood and that anointed one expired. Be pleased, O Lord, to forgive all follies, weaknesses, vanities, and sins of thy servant, and strengthen him to resist all future temptations. Give him prudence and discernment that he may avoid the evil, and a heart to choose the good. Give him fortitude to bear up under trying and adverse circumstances, and grace to endure all things for thy name's sake, until the end shall come, when all the saints shall rest in peace. Now, O Lord, thy servant has been obedient to the heavenly vision, and this is the vision he had in 1832. Or 1840, a week before that conference. So thy servant has been obedient to the heavenly vision which thou gavest him in his native land, and under the shadow of thine outstretched arm he has safely arrived in this place, to dedicate and consecrate this land unto thee. So we're seeing there's a physical dedication here taking place, much as we do with temples now. This dedication, as he continues on, dedication is for the gathering together of Judah's scattered remnants, according to the predictions of the holy prophets, for the building up of Jerusalem again after it has been trodden down by the Gentiles so long, and for rearing a temple in honor of thy name. Everlasting thanks be ascribed unto thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that thou hast preserved thy servant from the dangers of the seas, and from the plague and pestilence which has caused the land to mourn. The violence of man has also been restrained, and thy providential care by night and by day has been exercised over thine unworthy servant. Accept, therefore, O Lord, the tribute of a grateful heart for all past favors, and be pleased to continue thy kindness and mercy towards a needy worm of the dust. That's quite the statement of humility there, I would think. But also thanks, because he has indeed been saved from troubles at sea, crossing continents and countries. And now here we get to the meat of the blessing. O thou who didst covenant with Abraham, thy friend, and who didst renew that covenant with Isaac, and confirm the same with Jacob with an oath, that thou wouldst not only give them this land for an everlasting inheritance, but that thou would also remember their seed forever. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have long since closed their eyes in death, and made the grave their mansion. Their children are scattered and dispersed abroad among the nations of the Gentiles, like sheep that have no shepherd, and are still looking forward for the fulfillment of those promises which thou didst make concerning them. And even this land, which once poured forth nature's richest bounty, and flowed, as it were, with milk and honey, has, to a certain extent, been smitten with barrenness and sterility, since it drank from murderous hands of the blood of him who never sinned. So he's calling upon the Lord here to remember his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that those promises would be kept even after their death. To me, that's kind of a reminder of the title page to the Book of Mormon, right? That those who read the Book of Mormon would remember the promises and the covenants of God to us, and that we're not cast off. So this is that same kind of recall. And he's talking about how the land is not as rich and bountiful as it once was, but that it might become so bountiful once more. He then continues, Grant therefore, O Lord, in the name of thy well-beloved Son, Jesus Christ, to remove the barrenness and sterility of this land, and let springs of living water break forth to water its thirsty soil. Let the vine and olive oil produce in their strength, and the fig tree blossom and flourish. Let the land become abundantly fruitful when possessed by his rightful heirs. Let it again flow with plenty to feed the returning prodigals who come home with a spirit of grace and supplication. Upon it let the clouds distill virtue and richness, and let the fields smile with plenty. Let the flocks and the herds greatly increase and multiply upon the mountains and the hills, and let thy great kindness conquer and subdue the unbelief of thy people. Do thou take from them their stony heart, and give them a heart of flesh. And may the sun of thy favor dispel the cold mist of darkness which have beclouded their atmosphere. Incline them to gather in upon this land according to thy word. Let them come like clouds, and like doves to their windows. Let the large ships of the nations bring them from distant isles, and let kings become their nursing fathers, and queens with motherly fondness wipe the tear of sorrow from their eye. So he's asking for specific things to take place. Oil, honey, figs, fruitfulness, water, cleanliness, purity, right? To wash over the land. And then he prays that the heart of the people will be softened. I think that's a prayer we could use today. That could just be me and my own bias, though, but he continues, Thou, O Lord, did once move upon the heart of Cyrus to show favor unto Jerusalem and her children. Do thou now also be pleased to inspire the hearts of kings and the powers of the earth to look with a friendly eye towards this place, and with a desire to see thy righteous purposes executed in relation thereto. Let them know that it is thy good pleasure to restore the kingdom unto Israel, raise up Jerusalem as its capital, and constitute her people a distinct nation and government with David thy servant, even a descendant from the loins of ancient David to be their king. So he's calling upon, just as Cyrus' heart was softened, so will other leaders do it. And so will people who feel disposed to return to Israel. Let them be, I guess you would say, inspired to do the same thing and to return home. And haven't you seen that come forth, right? From the time of the Ottomans, from after this prayer, the Jews were slowly becoming more inclined to return back to Israel. As the years went by, more people tried to return, especially in light of what happened in World War II, which is why Israel was set up and confirmed as a good nation. So let's see. Let that nation or that people who shall take an active part in behalf of Abraham's children and in the raising up of Jerusalem find favor in thy sight. Let not their enemies prevail against them, neither let pestilence or famine overcome them, but let the glory of Israel overshadow them, and the power of the highest protect them. While that nation or kingdom that will not serve thee in this glorious work must perish according to thy word. Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted. So there's kind of the blessing and the cursing, right, that you see in so many of the Old Testament concerning Israel. Let those who will take an active part in behalf of Israel be blessed. Let those who will be their enemies be cursed. You can see that happening now. But Israel's still got a few lessons to learn. I think that's something we'll talk about in a future video. And now he continues. Though thy servant is now far from his home, and from the land bedewed with its earliest tear, yet he remembers, O Lord, his friend, who are there, and family for whom thy sake he has left, though poverty and privation be our earthly lot. Thou richly endow us with an inheritance where moth and rust do not corrupt, and where thieves do not break through and steal. And then here's where he remembers his benefactor who gave them the small bag of gold. The hands that have fed, clothed, or shown favor unto the family of thy servant in his absence, or that should have to do so, let them lose not their reward, but let a special blessing rest upon them. And in thy kingdom, let them have an inheritance when thou shalt become glorified in this society. Do thou also look with favor upon all those whose liberality I have been able to come to this land. And in the day when thou shalt reward all people according to their works, let these also not be passed by, or forgotten. But in time let them be in readiness. Let them be in readiness to enjoy the glory of those mansions which Jesus is gone to prepare. Particularly do bless thou the stranger in Philadelphia, whom I never saw, but who sent me gold, with a request that I should pray for him in Jerusalem. Now, O Lord, let blessings come upon him from an unexpected quarter. Let his basket be filled, and his storehouse abound with plenty. And let not the good things of the earth be his only portion, but let him be found among those to whom it shall be said, Thou hast been faithful over a few things, and I will make thee ruler over many. What a blessing, right? What a blessing. And I wish, like you said, unknown benefactor, I wish there was a way to find out who that is and find out if any blessings did indeed come to them. I would want to assume yes, but it would just be so interesting to find out how and in what way that person was blessed. O my Father in heaven, I now ask thee in the name of Jesus to remember Zion with all her stakes and with all her assemblies. She has been grievously afflicted and smitten. She has mourned, she has wept. Her enemies have triumphed and have said, Ah, where is thy God? Her priests and prophets have groaned in chains and fetters within the gloomy walls of prisons, while many were slain, and now sleep in the long arms of death. How long, O Lord, shall iniquity triumph and sin go unpunished? Do thou arise in the majesty of thy strength and make bare thine arm in behalf of thy people. Redress their wrongs, turn their sorrow into joy. Pour the spirit of light and knowledge, grace and wisdom into the hearts of her prophets, and clothe her priests with salvation. Let light and knowledge march forth through the empire of darkness, and may the honest in heart flow to their standard, and join in the march to go forth to meet the bridegroom. Let a peculiar blessing rest upon the presidency of thy church, for at them are the arrows of the enemy directed. Be thou to them a sun and a shield, their strong tower and a hiding place, and in the time of distress or danger, be thou near to deliver. Also, the quorum of the 12, do thou be pleased to stand by them, for thou knowest the obstacles which they have to encounter, the temptations to which they are exposed, and the privations which they must suffer. Give us, the 12, therefore strength according to our day, and help us to be help us to bear a faithful testimony of Jesus and his gospel, to finish with fidelity and honor the work which thou hast given us to do, and then give us a place in thy glorious kingdom. And let this blessing rest upon every faithful officer and member in thy church. And all the glory and honor will we ascribe unto God and the Lamb forever and ever. Amen. Elder Hyde would not stay on the Mount of Olives for much longer. He would actually leave the 26th. He would pack up. He would plan to leave with one of those gentlemen who accompanied him there. And you saw earlier where he talked about, thank you for helping me to avoid many of the diseases and troubles that would beset so many on the travels. The person who helped give him security and bring him into Jaffa and then Jaffa on, I forget his name, Gazger, died of typhus. Elder Hyde and he were traveling back together, and he died of typhus at an embassy where they were trying to get him help. Elder Hyde left him behind while he was sick, and the doctor sent him a note saying 2 hours later your friend passed. So Elder Hyde was lucky to escape such diseases that claimed so many people he traveled with. he returned home. It took him months to return home. He took his time, but he had in his mind that when he set off on this mission, that on the return, he would preach at a few places, but stopping specifically in Germany and preaching the gospel for some time there, and he did so. And some of the things he experienced and witnessed were fantastic. This whole trip was a great blessing to the church. It provided some good news, some positive publicity, like about the Mormonite who was in the land. I like that, the Mormonite who was in the land to preach the gospel. And there was great curiosity about this gentleman who claimed to be an apostle. And so he was a curiosity. And people back then were a little bit different. They went out of their way to help strangers and to accomplish his mission. And brothers and sisters, this is especially, it's good that we should think upon this great blessing that Elder Hyde was able to perform. In that, because of his work, there was indeed a hastening of the Jews returning to the Holy Land. We all know that really hit its high peak just after World War II, when Israel itself was established in the Transjordan. And we know that the enemies to Israel stumbled mightily, right? Series of wars. Israel obtained some land, Gaza, West Bank, Samaria, Judea. You get the idea. And while my heart mourns for those who stand against Israel, I don't think it is. I don't know that you have an Israel today and a gathering of Judah without the devilish adversity that the 12, or the adversity that the 12, that Israel's learning to overcome and to get through. I believe they're being chastened. Just as the saints were chastened for not building a temple, I believe the people in Israel are being chastened for not looking to the Lord. I think there are certain comparisons you can make between Egypt and America. For a time when the Assyrians and Babylonians were coming, Judah thought they could rely on Egypt to keep them safe. And today they rely on American planes and other technology. And they're not looking to the Lord. And we're seeing America lose its spiritual center. It might be lost already. It might be in the process of being lost. I don't want to sound too pessimistic, so we'll leave it at that. But we're really seeing some of the comparisons play out today that you could see in the Bible between Israel and Egypt and their relations to other nations like Babylon and Assyria and things. And while I don't want anyone to suffer, these people are there kind of like set up to be a stumbling block for the Jews today, to help them to soften their hearts and humble themselves and turn to God and not the arm of flesh. And I think that's what will happen I don't think Israel learns its lesson until the Lord returns and fights its battle for them. But those are hard lessons you have to learn, and there's a lot of tragedy and heartbreak involved in that. So we should pray for everyone on all sides. And we should pray for the Lord to hasten his work, that suffering will be lessened. Maybe that's the point. I don't know. I was shocked by how much I learned while I was reading this, and the growth in testimony that I have about Joseph Smith as a prophet. During Orson Hyde's, if you guys want more information on this, while Orson was doing his travels, right, his whole mission across the East, traveling across the ocean. When he's in Europe, he's continually sending letters back to the saints, and he's getting counsel from the prophet Joseph Smith. Many of Orson and Joseph's communications are in the Joseph Smith papers. You can find them there. If you want to know more, let's go back to this. If you want to know more about Elder Hyde's journey, he wrote a short book, Orson Hyde, A Voice from Jerusalem. You can find this on thrift books, anywhere from $10.25 to $50. You can purchase that. I just today found, and I just Googled Voice from Jerusalem, Orson Hyde, and I found Internet Archive, Voice from Jerusalem, and they have a, what do you call this, where it's photographed, and you can read, this is Elder Hyde's detail of his journeys, everything he went through. And at the start, at the beginning of the book, there's an introduction where he talks about what happened, why he was going. Then on page 4 and 5, you get, they put word for word here the letters of certification he was sent with by the First Presidency, by the Governor of Illinois, and by the Secretary of State. As well as beforehand, they did the reasons for the trip to Israel. Then you get dated copies of letters that he sent out. Things he wrote to people. Things he worried about. Things he thought about. Then towards the very end, you get a copy of the prayer he offered in Jerusalem, and the circumstances of his travel, the people he traveled with. So you find out what happened to him in Trieste and Regensburg and London, Constantinople, as far as due to the letters he sent and his recollections. Then you do get the prayer, and then there's a hymn back about Israel. It's fantastic. I'm actually going to buy this book. I've ordered it. I don't have it yet, so I can keep a copy on hand. But I really learned so much just from this limited reading. The research I was able to do just over the last month or so on this trip. And watching what happens in the news now has been especially touching. And in church news, 2 years ago, Elder Cook traveled to Israel and marked the 180th anniversary, 2 years ago today, on what the Holy Land means to the Latter-day Saints. I thought that was outstanding. So again, this is a picture of the... Why didn't it change? Oh, there we go. This is a picture of the Orson Hyde Memorial Gardens that they set up a few years ago. The church purchased the land where he said his prayer, and they set up a memorial garden to commemorate Elder Hyde's prayer. And you see this stone in the middle. There's a description in Arabic, Hebrew, and English of the work Elder Hyde performed. And I think he performed quite admirably after a small, swift kick in the butt to get him moving out of the States and finally getting him to crossing the oceans. But brothers and sisters, there's really so much in church history that we miss and we don't understand. And I think we need to apply our hearts more towards that understanding and knowing what's happened and what's gone before. Because it really does matter how it affects our testimonies and our outlook. And we do need to realize Israel is a spiritual gathering, but also a physical gathering. It is a physical gathering that needs to take place. And I do think that's why there's all this turmoil in the region, is because the devil's up to raising up a fuss to try and drive the Jews out so that prophecy cannot come to fruition. But the Lord, his works will not be frustrated, right? And he's seen all things from the beginning to the end, and he knows what's going to happen. And we need to be like ancient Israel of old. And Israel today needs to be like ancient Israel of old and exercise our Lord and put our faith in Christ and in God, that he will consecrate our efforts and that everything we set out to do will be successful in. I hope you got something from this video. I really had so much fun with it. I hope you'll check out the book. Again, Internet Archive, Voice from Jerusalem, Orson Pratt. It's there for free. You can read it. It's like 40 pages, 36 pages. Easy read. It's cheap if you want to buy a copy of your own. I think there's a copy in church history, in the history of the church, I should say, or at least excerpts of it. And I know they have excerpts of it in the companion to the study of the Old Testament that was produced or edited by Ludlow. I forget if it was Daniel or Victor. But there are excerpts of the prayer. And I think those can be productive in going back and rereading and reading in light of the gathering and restoration of Israel that's taking place today. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. I promise I will be back tomorrow with another video. It'll be a little later at night, but I'll have a video out to you tomorrow. In the meantime, thank you for listening. I hope you got something from this. I hope you will like and subscribe. I don't want to, and I hope you'll comment back. I hope you'll share your stories. Let me know about other stories in church history that you'd like to have covered. Other things you'd like to have discussed or talked about. Things you're lightly familiar with or you're very familiar with. Just let me know what you'd like to talk about. In the meantime, thank you for listening. Peace out.